Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. And welcome to our session. I'm hearing background music. I hope that's going to go down a little bit. Okay, so welcome everybody to our session about learning developer tools to extend the Microsoft Power Platform. My name is Laskewitz, and I am a Power Platform developer advocate at Microsoft. And I'm not the only one here. You can see him that way. It's Scott Durow.
Hey, Daniel.
Hey, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Great to be here live. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, so my name is Scott Durow, and I am a solution architect, and I've been an MVP for, well, since 2013, and had the great privilege to grow up with the platform over the years, seen it change, moving into all of the great stuff that we see today. So yeah, it's fantastic to be here and to have this opportunity to talk to you about all of these amazing developer tools that we have got available to us and the investments in this area. So just before we start, though, just a quick thanks to all the moderators, all of the team that's in the background that will be answering your questions, and led by our moderator, Bruno Capuano. So thank you so much. And also to our producer, Frank, as well. He's doing a great job in the background and making sure that everything works. So you can go to this QR code and scan it. And there's also a link there. So if you do want to, you could actually follow along with us, because what we're going to be doing is going through this Learn module and exploring the topics that it's talking about. And we're also going to be looking at perhaps some of the newer things that are coming out, where there are newer opportunities compared to what it talks about in the Learn module. So yeah, if you want to follow us along, do. If you don't, that's fine. You can just listen to us and see what we're talking about. So yeah, hopefully it makes sense, right, Daniel?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's meant
it
to be
sounded good.
Yeah, it's meant to be a kind of a fireside chat in a pub. I think that was the sort of the format. I think when was the last time that we were having a fireside chat in a real pub right next to each other? Was it 2-3 years ago?
Fireside chat.
Well, I'm not sure it was a fire.
We were in Amsterdam, I know that. But,
that's right. It was in Amsterdam.
It was just before COVID hit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. No fires, but yeah, that was a great time we had there. So yeah, the learning objectives. We're going to be looking at pro dev tools, and there are a number of different ways of accessing these pro dev tools that allow you to extend the Power Platform. And we're going to look at how you can create server-side logic to extend the Power Platform, but we're also going to look at how you can create custom controls that can extend the user interface of the Power Platform. And we're going to specifically talk about the Dataverse and the Power Apps side of the Power Platform. And it's obviously a big topic. There's a lot to talk about, but we're not going to be able to cover it all. So really, we're talking about the Fusion Dev side of things. So Daniel, I mean, Fusion Dev gets talked about a lot. What's your take on what Fusion Dev means? I know we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, so I think Fusion Dev, for a lot of people, it's a new term, but it's been around for ages, actually. But to me, it's something where people from multiple disciplines come together in a team and they work on achieving a goal. And that could be low-code developer, pro-code developers, all kinds of people together. Admins could be in there. And they all together create something really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, that kind of bringing together of both sides of the house. I think that's great. The domain experts and the people who actually do their job and know about the stuff, and then the people who can then listen to those people. I mean, it's something that we've been trying to do for a very long time, but I don't think we've really had that opportunity for the platform to support it. It's always been people working in silos and not really being able to come together on the same set of tooling. So in that area, we are going to look at some key, so 3 focus areas. And the first being solution deployment and ALM. And ALM stands for Application Lifecycle Management. And as a pro dev, and when you're looking at managing the solution that you've built from this Fusion team, you want to be able to make sure that you've got a repeatable process to be able to deploy your apps that you're building. So it's less prone to error, less manual intervention, etc. And so really that's what ALM is about. But also managing the solution, making sure that you can use it, you can put it into things like source control, which is something that obviously from a development pro dev perspective, we've been doing for a very long time. So how do we manage that in the new Power Platform world? And then plugin development, it's using C# to extend the logic of Dataverse on the server. And then the Power Apps component framework, which is PCF, that's the short version, being able to create components in Power Apps in the user interface. So, I mean, Daniel, have you kind of seen any examples of this recently in the work that you've been doing?
Of Fusion development, yeah, for sure. I see a lot of people come together and try to create great solutions, and I really like the fact that people are more thinking about it nowadays. So they are thinking, how can we do this in the long run? How can we make this a successful thing? Because, of course, I've been doing tons of custom connector development projects. And those custom connectors are really cool because you can extend all the connectors that are already out there. But you also want people to build something with that, because I really don't like building something and then nobody uses it, or only me uses it. I really hate that. So that's kind of the story also with Fusion, that I think the pro devs should be aware of how big of an opportunity this also is.
Definitely.
Because for instance, for me, when I create a custom connector and I make that available for the whole world, for instance, then so many people are using what I have built, and I think that's also really a big compliment to yourself, right? So that's also a thing that I've been seeing for a very, very long time already. So I mean, that's really cool.
Custom connectors, that's your thing, right? You are the custom connector guy. And it was interesting because I was at the Power Platform conference, the Microsoft Power Platform conference in Orlando a few weeks ago, and Scott Hanselman was building a API, a ProDev API, and then Julia Casper then taking that from a custom connector and then consuming that. So I think it's that discoverability you're talking about, that you can create that connector, you can create that component that it can be used by people who don't need to know how it works, just they know what it looks like from the outside. You know, they know how to configure it, and then they can just use it in lots of different apps. It's the classic reusable component story that we've been trying to get, you know, like ActiveX and all that kind of stuff in the past. You know, we've been trying to get to this point where we can truly get this reusable component in a discoverable way, where you don't really need to have any knowledge of how the components work to use it inside your apps.
No, and it's pretty interesting also, because for a lot of people, it's also different than what they used to do before. Because now when you deliver a custom connector, for instance, to the low-code devs that are gonna create apps, workflows, chatbots, whatever with it, that you have to think about how they are gonna consume it, instead of you're being the pro dev working on a project, creating a connector, you know everything about it. You really have to think about how somebody in a different role, not even a different person, what's always the problem with pro devs as well, because whenever I build something, I need to document it and make it available for other pro devs to understand it and to go on with that. But now it's also a different persona, and that's really interesting to see as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a great point. That the mindset shift that you have to make from a pro dev perspective, not just like that technical documentation like you're talking about. And we're going to be looking at these tools that are going to we're going to run through specifically the configuration migration tool, which allows us to package some data into our solutions. And so from an ALM perspective, and then deploy it, and then manage our solution inside source control, like we talked about earlier. And we're also going to look at using the plugin registration tool to deploy that C# plugins inside Dataverse. But the last one, the Power Platform CLI, this is the sort of the main event, if you like. You know, this is the thing that really gives us all of the power to connect to the Power Platform and do basically all of the above, really. I mean, it's becoming the Power Platform CLI is really becoming a one-stop shop, right? And to your point earlier about, you know, that mindset shift, when we look at using the Power Platform CLI to create a PCF component, you know, that mindset shift is about how do we create the metadata that will then define the properties that makers will use when they're creating apps, so that it makes sense to people. You know, it's not something that is just going to be confusing because it's all kind of technical terms. You have to think about it in terms of making it, formatting it in just some basic things like how do you order the properties so that they appear in the properties pane in an order that makes sense. You know, you're not jumping up and down. So community tools then. I mean, you've recently come to work for Microsoft, Daniel, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, in the developer advocacy. But before that, you were a Microsoft MVP. So you were making community tools. I just love the fact that there's such a vibrant community, you know, people creating these tools to extend the Power Platform.
Yeah, I think it's really cool also because if you look at the XRM toolbox, for instance, that's like the big one where you have all the different tools in there. I see so many tools come out every month almost, and they all have their use for a productivity thing or something really cool that you can do with it. And you, of course, have built some pretty cool community tools as well, right? Because I remember when I started working with model-driven apps that I saw a tool called Ribbon Workbench. I don't know. Some people probably know it, but it's it's one of those community tools that everybody knows, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I remember actually you reaching out to me going, so what is this Ribbon Workbench thing, and how do I use it to add these buttons in these model-driven apps?
Yeah, and you were like, "Come on, dude, that's 10-year-old."
But you know what? I think that's what's awesome about the Power Platform, and you know the way that we're seeing this sort of convergence of all these different technologies coming together to make this really cohesive platform with this component-based architecture. So yeah, and the fact that now we have the Power Platform CLI bringing together all of this different stuff together into this single way of interacting. So it really does show that Microsoft are serious about bringing all these things that maybe used to be disconnected, you know, like Canvas apps and model-driven apps, they used to be separate, you know, bringing it in to be a much more consistent from a pro dev perspective. So let's go over into our Learn module. So this is, if you'd followed that link on the QR code, perhaps someone of the moderator could put a link to it again in the chat, just so that people can just click on it. And if you go onto this, then we've got 7 of these units here. So we've got actually the last one is a check your knowledge, which we'll do, I think, if we have got time. And
you didn't even finish it.
You see, it's got checks. Look, I've got
you got a couple of checks.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Did I actually do the check your knowledge?
No, I don't think so.
But
well, let's see how you'll do at the end of the session.
Oh no, the pressure. I can't take it. So we're going to step through each of these because you know we could go through this with slides and things, but no one's really gonna like that. But it's actually written quite well in terms of allowing you to sort of get a good overview in this first section here. And it's talking about the Power Platform CLI. And as you can see here, that we've got this this ability to have a standalone. We've got, you know, the standalone. What am I doing here? Standalone installation, or we got a Visual Studio extension here. And actually, really, the standalone extension has been somewhat deprecated. I'm not sure if that's if it has truly been deprecated, but certainly it is favored using the Visual Studio Code extension. And Daniel, you work on a Mac, right? So you use Visual Studio on a Mac?
Yeah, so I always have to go for the Visual Studio Code extension. So that's it's cross-platform, and I love that. So that's really good to see as well. There are some steps that you can do because these are more for the Windows side of things, for instance. So they have a dependency on Windows. Yeah. But most of the things are actually available also in Mac OS or Linux, for that matter.
Yeah, that's awesome. Again, that is something that really is sort of new, really, to this whole area.
Yeah.
And it used to be very much a Windows development environment that you needed. So it's awesome to see that. We've also got the Power Platform Connector CLI, that's your bag, Daniel. So
yeah. So the interesting part here is that they actually try to move that into the PAC CLI. So the Power Platform CLI will eventually have all those Power Platform Connector CLI commands in there as well. It's currently in preview, but the Power Platform Connector CLI was a really useful tool to create a connector inside of your environment, or to download it, or to update it, or to validate even your custom connectors. So whenever you were done developing your custom connector, you always want to validate it before you would put it on GitHub, or that you would submit it for review at Microsoft, so that they can publish that in the connector, the library that they have. So that's where the Power Platform Connector CLI comes into play. Right. And as I said, they are going to move it into the Power Platform CLI. Yeah. But for now, the Power Platform Connector CLI is still the way to go.
Okay.
And Power Platform CLI will be there probably at the end of the year. It will probably be a lot further. You can already try it out. I really like it. I do it always with my demos. And one of the things that I really didn't like about the Power Platform Connector CLI was that the token timeout was like 30 minutes or something. And, you know, whenever you do a demo and you log into the Power Platform Connector CLI before the session, and you had a demo just at the 30-minute mark, it was always like, do I have to log in again or not? And I don't have the problem anymore with the Power Platform CLI. So that's also a good thing.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. And we'll actually see that. We'll actually see the creating of the auth profiles and see how that works. Because obviously authentication is always going to be a challenge with any CLI, you know, and it really makes it easy with the Power Platform CLI. And so and there's a mention here of ALM. So, you know, we talked about application lifecycle management and how important that is. And it does say, you know, about consistency and repeatability. You know, that really sums up application lifecycle management. So you don't have to worry about constantly remembering all the different buttons to press and the things to fill out, because that's always going to end up being something that could go wrong. And there's a great set of Azure DevOps tasks. So if you use Azure DevOps in your organization, you can use those to do things like extract solutions from one environment and then install it into another. And there's also GitHub Actions as well. So, you know, you've got both options there. And so the Dataverse, the tools for Dataverse are available under Microsoft NuGet. So we can actually install them quite easily from NuGet, and we'll do that in a minute. But actually, recently, we can also get access to them by, have you guessed it, the Platform CLI. This is going to be a constant recurring theme.
Yeah.
Like, you know. Oh, and by the way, you can also do it by the Power Platform CLI.
Yeah, when was that released? Actually, earlier this week.
It's very.
I think so. It was really hot off the press.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. So you might have heard it here first, perhaps. Maybe you've not noticed it. You really have to keep an eye on the release notes of the CLI, because things pop up constantly.
Yeah.
So we'll go to the next page here, and which is install and use developer tools. So we'll look at how we can do it from this Learn module, and then we'll look at it briefly from the Power App CLI. So what we're doing here is installing the developer tools, and we've got a big PowerShell script here. So I'm just going to copy it. So we don't really want to go into what it does, but basically it's downloading a load of stuff from NuGet, and then it's putting them into a folder. So I'm going to make a demo tools, and actually what's the dev tools? Yes, it's dev
tools.
Yeah.
MD.
Yeah. And then we do cd dev tools.
Oh, you just created demo tools. So
oh, sorry. Let's put demo tools in.
Let's use that for now.
That's what happens when you're worrying that you may have not passed all the exam questions at the end of it.
Sorry for that.
and then we'll run this, and it just goes and downloads them all, and it just downloads them one by one. And if I go over, I can go and actually open up that folder after it's done it. And here we go. It's gradually loading them. And if you go into the tools here, we've got our configuration migration, which allows you to extract data and package it up to move from one environment to the other. And then we've got some other cool tools like the solution packager. And the package deployment allows us to package up our data with our solution and move it between environments. And that also allows us to package up for deployment to app source, which allows you to kind of create an ISV package that you might be able to make available for customers. And then plugin registration is for uploading that C# plugin to allow us to extend the server side inside Dataverse. So if we go back to our Learn module here, and if we go to it says what it's saying go into here, that's fine. So step 2 then, what we're doing here is explore a registered plugin with the plugin registration tool. So really what it's asking you to do is go into the plugin registration tool folder, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the Power Platform CLI, because that's the why not,
because you're a cool kid, right?
Well, I mean, because it does it right, so
yeah.
You really have to. So you have to make sure you've installed the Power Platform CLI. So if I search in platform here, you will see the Power Platform tools. There we got it. And power mode. Wow, that looks good. Goodness me. I'm not going to get distracted by that.
No.
It's just got a cool icon. So Power Platform tools, and it really gives you, just simply install it. And what's cool about this is that once you've installed it, it will keep updating itself. So you don't have to worry about always having the latest version. It's always going to kind of download it, install it whenever you leave Visual Studio in VS Code. So if you type pack once you've got it installed, it gives you a list of all these different commands. Now, the way my brain works is that, I don't know about you, Daniel, but the way my brain works is that if I don't need to remember something, my brain will not remember it. So basically, I don't have a way of, I don't commit these to memory. All I do is I come in here and go, pack, and then, okay, well, what operations do I have available to me? Which is why I constantly discover the new ones, because the new one pops up in here. There's a few.
I have the same thing with all the parameters in there. Like I don't remember them. So whenever I have to do pack admin something and then use a parameter in there, I don't remember it. I'm actually wondering if the audience, if they remember stuff like that, or do they just do it out of their heads, like writing all commands?
Yeah,
It's just
well,
one line,
absolutely.
but I don't know.
Yeah,
It doesn't
just
stick.
let us know in the chat, definitely. You know, because this is I need to know. You know, are we just unusual? I heard someone say recently that everyone thinks that everyone else is the weird one and they're normal. I don't know if that's true or not. Everyone thinks that
I
they're
think
normal and everyone else is not unusual.
I think we're weird and the rest
I
is
know.
normal.
Exactly. When I heard that, I was like, no, I'm the other way around. I just think I'm odd and everyone else is
Yeah.
normal. So yeah, what I've just done here is I've just sent pack tool, and it's given us a list. That's what's great. You can kind of gradually explore each of the different verbs. And so I can say pack tool list. And what that does is it lists all the different tools that I've got available to me. And, you know, you can see that they're installed. So I've already got them installed. So if I say pack tools, let's open up the plugin registration tool, PRT. And what this now allows us to do is to go in, and I can log in to it's opened up in a strange place. Let's go there. What in the earth did that do? Let's go and there we go. Oh, it's full screen. Goodness me. Well, I don't know what is going on there. Let's go there. Right, that's better. And we can create a new connection here, and then we can log in, and we can put in our credentials there, or if you're connected to Active Active Directory as you're logging on your machine, that would automatically log in. And I can just go and select, you know, the different environments that I've got. So actually, what I'm going to go is go back to this one and create login. Not with me. I'm going to log in with the Learn Live login, because that's what gives me the one that I want. And let's go here, log in. There we go. And this will then show me the environments that I've got available to me. Let's do it again. And now it should show me the environments. There we go. So Learn Live, and I'll select that. And what we can do now is once we've got those, it should give us a list of all the different plugins that we have registered in this system. So if I go and create a plugin project, which incidentally, you've guessed it, the Power Platform CLI can do for us. Whenever it is again, you can go and just create your C# plugin, compile it, and then you can go and actually upload by registering. So you can use the register command there. So you can see here we've got a whole load of assemblies, and these are actually all the built-in ones that we don't, you know, that already come with our environment. And if we expand plugin here, you can see that for each plugin, which is a class that encapsulates some logic that will run on the server, we've got a set of steps. And so if we look at one of these steps, we've got a set of things that it can do. So you register a step on a particular message like create or delete, and you define which table you want to register that on. And then you say, well, it's going to run it asynchronously or synchronous. And you can give it some properties like, you know, only put it at a particular point in the pipeline, so before the transaction or after transaction, lots of different things. And, you know, in the Learn module, there's links to kind of learning more about this. But it's great because once you've done that and uploaded that, then it doesn't matter how you interact with Dataverse through the API or through the front end or through uploads, that bit of logic will always run. And that's what's so special about plugins. So let's go.
How many of those have you created in your life? Because you've been around for a while.
I really would
you
not
don't
like
keep count.
I would not like a lot of plugins. And I think, but it's interesting because as we move, the Power Platform moves in a direction of moving to much more of a low code. I think the need for plugins is being reduced. I think, you know, it used to be when we were with Microsoft CRM and Microsoft Dynamics, it was one of those things that everyone was doing in every single solution, but we're certainly seeing less and less of it as more alternatives are coming available. And actually, I did see in the release notes that there is going to be some way of creating power effects logic that you can run on the server.
That's
So
awesome.
so that's exciting. So that might even reduce the need entirely for, well, certainly to a lot less for creating plugins.
Yeah.
So the next one, unmanaged versus managed. Well, this is this is a big
this
topic,
is a good
right?
question. This is a good question for the audience.
This is
because we're gonna divide them.
Yeah. So tell us. Can we? Is there any way of doing polls? I don't know. Can the moderators do polls? I feel like we should have some kind of.
They can just put it in a chat, like if they like managed or if they are in team unmanaged.
Team unmanaged, yeah. But basically, so the official. Let's go with the official line, right? Let the party line. That's what the learn module is. The idea is that in your development environment, you would create a solution that contains all the stuff about your app. And about all the various different logic, your plugins, like we talked about, your tables, your columns, your forms, your views, your apps, APIs, your Power Automate flows, all of the things that you can have in your Dataverse environment. You put that in a solution, and when you export that as a managed solution, and that allows you to import that downstream into subsequent environments. So when it becomes a managed solution, you can no longer, you can't change that solution in the target environment if you set some settings. So if you, in your solution, you say, okay, I'm going to not allow people to make changes to certain things. When it gets deployed as a managed solution, that you can't go in and edit it. Some things, if you do try and edit it, what it does is it creates like an unmanaged layer on top of your managed solution, which overrides your managed solution. But what that does then allow you to do is then if you wanted to update your managed solution at a later date, you can then update it at that lower level without overwriting the unmanaged changes on top of it. And it also allows you to have things like dependent layers and manage patches and things like that. So really the summary is managed solutions are for deploying to non-development environments, if like QA, staging, production, that's the party line. Some people say everything should be unmanaged, but personally, I've only used managed solutions for a very long time, and I've really not had any problem. So what we've got in the chat there, unmanaged in development, managed in test and production environments. So that seems to be the overall the overall it's consensus, which is good.
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, exactly. That's good. Everyone's playing the game and everyone's saying the right answer. Correct. So you get bonus points for getting that answer.
Yeah, 100 XP.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now it's interesting because there is a solution packager tool which allows you to extract data from Dataverse using the configuration migration tool, and then combine it with a solution. So in that previous diagram, we just showed exporting the solution, and then we then showed it being imported into a target solution. But what we can do is we can also, between that, we can actually put it into source code. So if you imagine you've got your development environment with an unmanaged solution, we can export that solution and we can then unpack that into a whole load of individual files that gets put into like Git or whatever your source code repository is. And then the great thing about that is every time you've got a change, you can see what's happened. Every time you export it and unpack it, you can see what's gone on in that. You can see if someone's added an attribute, a column or a table or whatever. And then when you're ready to deploy, you can then repack it, and put it into our solution, and then we can then import it downstream. So it's a way of taking much more of a pro dev approach to your solutions and treating it as code effectively. And that allows you a much more mature ALM story.
And this is normally what you do with the Azure DevOps tasks or the GitHub actions and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe the Power Platform CLI again.
Exactly. Well,
yeah.
Yes, exactly. As we're going to show. So I've got, so if I export a solution here, so I can say, if I learn live, and I say here, I've got in my environment something called the core solution. So I can export that solution from my environment. And that just creates, so I'm using the pack CLI to export the solution automatically. I don't need to go into the user interface and go click on the solution, export the solution, because you could do that. And it will just automatically download that zip. If we go into our, back into our, in here, you've got a solution. I could just select here and I could say export solution, right? But it's a manual task. But here you could actually use the pack CLI, or you could use the Azure DevOps task or the GitHub task to do this. And once you've got that, if we go back into our Learn module, we can then use the pack solution unpack, again, pack CLI, and we're going to unpack our core solution, which we just exported like this. There we go, into a folder called My Solution. And so it's it then breaks down all of, so if we open up in code in here, so let's use this, and we go into our folder structure here. If we say, look in My Solution, what we've got here is now all of our individual files, which give us all of the data about the configuration about our different solution elements. And if you had a change and you unpacked it, you'd see that in source control.
Yeah, and that's really nice to see the different changes that you've done, right? So that's a really
it's so
really cool
awesome.
part.
It is really so awesome, because I mean it gives you that sort of peace of mind, because you don't have to then worry about well, what am I changing? Because they used to be like, export your solution, and you're like, well, I don't know what's going to go in. I'm just going to hope for the best. You know? But now what we can do is you can see it in source control, and you can see the diffs, and you can have like pull requests and all of those kind of things. So next really one, nice. Deploy apps with the package deployer. So as we mentioned before, the configuration migration tool, once we've used the solution packager to repack our solution from its different component parts back into a zip. If we want to then provide a much more turnkey way of deploying it, maybe through AppSource or something like that, or even just through interactive experience, like a kind of installer, you know, Windows installer, along with some configuration data, that's where we use the package deployer. So if you go into this here and we look at that, so what we do is we export both our solution, and indeed we could, this is quite unique to the solution packager. We could have multiple solutions rather than just installing a single solution, and then we could then combine that with some data using the configuration migration tool. So the Power Platform CLI allows you to start the configuration migration tool, and what you do is you create a schema, and then you export that data, and it creates this zip file. And then we would then combine those with inside a Visual Studio project, that when we build that, it creates this special solution packager zip. And that solution packager zip can then be used by the package deployer to import into our target environment. So the package deployer is like the vehicle for getting that package in. Also, you could upload that to AppSource, and then other people could use that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really, really powerful to use that also with the configuration data, etc. That's really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you can actually do more than you can, you can include, it doesn't have to be just configuration data. You could actually have, if you wanted to, some sample data for your app. So if you had an AppSource application that, people are going to use, download it from AppSource and install it to the environment, you might want to actually showcase it. How does it work?
Yeah.
So the next exercise then, use the Power Apps CLI. Well, we've been using the Power Apps CLI already. Did we mention that? I think we might have both times. So we've installed it already. We've installed it from the Visual Studio extensions, and we typed in pack and we got to list all the different options. And you can see here actually this screenshot is already out of date because I think Daniel, now
it happens.
Job, right? This is your job. You need to keep this screenshot up to date.
Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
It's pretty much a full-time job, I reckon.
Every week a new screenshot.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you would automate it with Power Automate Flow.
Yeah.
Right?
Do some RPA.
Yeah, absolutely. Process automate. You could just go, can I have that by the end of the week, please? That would be fantastic. A blog
okay,
post.
great.
Anyway, right. So what we're doing, firstly, what this module is showing us how to do is how to authenticate, because we haven't actually authenticated yet with the CLI. So one of the verbs here is pack auth. And what it allows us to do is to go and create an authentication profile. It pops up with a login, and you can have multiple different authentication profiles. So you can see, you can list them, and you can select an existing one. So you're working on multiple different environments. And you need to provide it with an instance URL, and you can grab that from your session details inside Power Apps. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use this to create a PCF component, and we're going to not the auth. We are going to use this. We're going to create a folder for our PCF component, and this is going to be cd lab like that, and we can now run this pack PCF init command. Okay, so when we go into the PCF verb, then there's a whole load of additional functionality we can use for creating user interface components to extend the user interface in Power Apps. So what we're using is npm install, because this is a TypeScript project, so we need to use all the node modules. And so a PCF, this pack PCF init command here has got a number of different things here. We're going to give it a namespace, which in this case is lab. And the namespace basically allows us to create a unique code component. So it's not going to overlap with any other code components in our environment. And then there's a name, which is going to be the class name. And there's two types of template. We can have field, which is just like a text box or a drop down or something like that, as well as dataset, which might be a grid or something there. We've got a question. Azure DevOps pipeline to be used for solution packager management and deployment. I don't believe you can do it by using the native. I don't think there's a task, or there certainly wasn't when I last checked. But you could certainly use the pack CLI to do that, from a task. So yeah, that was the question. I don't know if you know, Daniel, if there's a solution.
No, I don't know actually.
The last time I did it, I used PowerShell to do that. I used the PowerShell module because it's interesting, because you can run the solution packager either interactively from the desktop, or you can use a PowerShell as well to do it, or indeed it's via app source.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should enter a feature request.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Or maybe it's already there, because that's the great thing about the Power Platform, right? You blink and there's
next week.
Next week. Exactly. So I'm going to go into my PCF component here.
No, you're already in there.
I'm already in there. Okay. And I'm going to say, okay, here we go. We've got it in our, so it's lab PCF. I'm just going to say code dot reuse the current window. And we are looking at the structure we've got here of our TypeScript project. And so we've got an index TypeScript, and this is basically where it defines the user interface functionality. So, and it's basically just HTML. So this module here allows us to sort of show that it's just HTML. So what we're going to do here is going to create some, we're going to create a little bit of, let's go and create a couple of things here, which is a label and a container. And then what we're going to do is inside the init function here, we're going to just simply add this label into the container. Because what this init function does, let's go into Zen mode to see this a bit easier. So what we've got is it basically passes us a container. So you can see there, you got this stock container, and we can then just append whatever HTML we want to that container. So when you put this control inside Power Apps, you get given a container, which is then, you could use React, you could use whatever. You could just manually construct HTML elements and put them in there. You could create an iframe if you wanted to. There's all sorts of things. I mean, literally the sky's the limit, but you have to stay within that container. You know, you're not really meant to affect any elements outside of that container. But you can also register things like you can have CSS files as well. So add that to the Power Apps as well. So then you can use CSS names. And then once you've done that,
see we are creating an input here.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So this is setting this is a of type label, and then we're creating the input element there,
the value in there.
Yeah, and then we've got creating the element. It's interesting actually, because what we need to do is what we're doing is appending this to the document. What we get passed in here is this container here, and so that container is then just simply being appended to this container. So it's interesting that this code is sort of calling, you know, it's got a container which is then being added to the container, which is a little bit confusing. You know, I would probably name that to be like root div or something like that. And then, you know, append
not underscore container.
underscore container. Yeah, we got inception going on there. And so if we now come back to we open up a terminal here, what we can do is we can say npm start watch.
Oh, first save it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. There we go. And well, actually, that wouldn't really matter, because we could. What's great about this is that when you run it in watch mode, it will actually watch the changes that are being made to the code, so that what happens is that you of course it's not going to work. What was it saying here? Expected identify found equals. What if I put a there we go. I'd somehow overwritten some code. Nice.
Okay, I was just following the manual, so I was npm start in the manual.
Yeah. Okay. So npm start, that will just simply start it. That's fine. But I just use npm start watch all the time, because actually, if you're going to be using this, because what this is doing is creating a test harness. So this is opened up a web browser, and it's actually showing this text box here, which has got, it's been appended. So if you see this little gray line around here, that's the container that it's being added to. And you can see that it's got all of the various different ways of interacting with it. And so it's sort of trying to simulate, if you like, the way that you'd interact with it inside Power Apps. And you can
zoom in a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So you can you can see here, we've got the form factor, the width, and so down here we've got the input. So this is a field control, so it allows us to enter in multiple different properties. So we've only got one defined. And remember, and when you were talking about this earlier, Daniel, you remember you were saying how it's really, you have to think carefully about how you define your components, so that your makers they know what this actually does. And so that's really where you do this, is in this something called the manifest file. And so that you define your properties, and you give it a display name, and you can get multiple different languages, you can translate it, and so that you make sure that you give it a description as well. And and so that it kind of describes how it would work. And the overall control can have a description as well. And so you can, describe how that functionality, sometimes you're probably going to need to provide some additional documentation, but really I try to, as far as I can, make the code components self-describing. And once you've done that, you would then use if we go over into the if we go into the back into our learn module, we would then use this pack PCF push to go and push it in to our environment. So let's do that. Let's go and create a new terminal here. And what that's going to do is it's going to use the current authenticated environment, because we previously authenticated against the Learn 22 Live 22 environment. And what it does, it just kind of creates this temporary solution wrapper, just to hold it as a sort of a vehicle for getting it. The solution is really nothing special. It's your component that the thing is special. But what is important is this this lab, this publisher prefix, because it has to be the publisher prefix that you're going to use when you add this to a solution to deploy it downstream. You can't just put anything in here. It has to be exactly the solution published. You can't change it after you published it.
And it's also really nice to have, because then you can kind of differentiate it from the other components that you have in your environment, right?
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. So it doesn't overlap. So once it's done that, you can then go back into your environment, and you will see your
solution, right?
Yeah. So if we refresh this, you'll see that solution that it's just imported, and it's just you could delete the solution after, and because it's an unmanaged code component, it will.
There it is.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got there, it's called Power Apps Tools, and then that's the publisher prefix. So if I added another code component with a different one, like samples, you get another solution called Power Apps Tools Samples. And inside there, your code component. And then once that's available, your users now can start to add that to your various different Power Apps. So it's I mean, obviously you'd export it as a managed solution and deploy it downstream once you've tested it, and then you can version it as well. So you can publish a new version, and then when people are certainly in Canvas apps, when people are using it, they've got an option whether or not they upgrade to the latest one. Okay. So this is where it starts to get interesting, because we've got to go into the back into the knowledge check.
Yeah. So we asked some questions during this session, and I hate to say, but Unmanaged won the poll.
Did it really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So I hope we learned something.
Oh dear. Well, I mean, that does just go to show you, actually, that there is the profile. Everyone here, that's interesting. I now know a lot about you guys, watching this, is that there's probably a lot of sort of diehard people who've been working with the Power Platform for a while. Honestly, it's not as bad as you think it is. So you just got to take the plunge and
we use Unmanaged as well, by the way, in development environment. So
yeah. Unmanaged, yes, in development environment. So so,
I'm trying to give it a positive swing.
We use unmanaged, in the development environment. So, but I mean, the number of failures I've had installing things has gone down considerably, and I think I've only had one problem in the last 2 years, I think. And that wasn't, I think that might have been my fault. So, right. So if we go to the test your knowledge, so there's a QR code here. You can go and vote. So what tools would you use to maintain application customizations as separate XML files? So, you can put it into source code, unpacking it and having that zip file and all the individual XML files. And actually, now we're seeing, I think it's still in preview, actually, Canvas apps with PowerFX being unpacked into YAML files as well. So you can see like changes to your PowerFX, your low code side of things, which is really cool.
YAML, that's my favorite.
Yes, YAML. I know you love YAML, don't you? I'm gonna make you a T-shirt, Daniel.
I love YAML.
Yes, exactly. That's right. And then make you wear it.
Oh
man. So, how long should we wait here? I mean, I don't know if this.
I don't know. Are there already enough responses? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, Frank, our producer, will tell us surely. Because It's splits apparently. It's
Okay.
a split. So we'll go ahead and go and say, well, actually, the solution packager is the the way of unpackaging. The clue is in the packaging when I mentioned it. Obviously, the package deployer is the way of getting the configuration migration tool zip data and along with your one or more solutions. And the plugin registration tool is for registering C# plugins. So next one, what language framework do you use for plugin development?
Did you get the one, the question one? Did you get it? Did you have the good answer, or because we're still testing you as well?
Yeah,
right?
well, that's true. Yeah, I should say what I think. Yeah, and then
no. Let's wait a little bit until we have enough responses.
Yeah. So well, here we've got three different types of language. Well, is it three different well, one language and then two kind of frameworks, I think. So sort of .NET, you know, and as I said, we've got C# plugins. So the answer is .NET, because you use .NET to make C#, and you have to use the .NET framework. You can't use .NET Core at the moment, so that's one of those things. So next one,
let's go to 3.
Yes, question 3, and I think this is the last question.
We got 80% on Node, by the way. So
really? Interesting.
They learned something.
Well, of course, you'd use Node. I mean, we were using Node just earlier to actually make the PCF component. So you kind of, you can be forgiven for thinking of that because it's fresh in your mind.
Yeah, sure.
So when would you use the package deployer? Yeah, so install Dataverse Solutions as a mobile application. That's a really good, always a good consideration, because mobile Dataverse model-driven apps need to work ideally on mobile as well as tablet. And then you've also got B, to install one or more solutions with the configuration data, and then C, to add configuration data into a desktop application. So B and C are kind of slightly different, subtly different. So what do you think? 100% C. Wow, interesting. Interesting. Well, I can see, because they're very similar, those two, aren't they? I mean, a desktop application is going to be one of the ways to have configuration data, but also the thing is that your app can run in mobile, tablet scenarios as well. So, and it can deploy that the package deployer can deploy one or more solutions alongside that data. So B is probably the more specific, if you like.
Now everybody knows.
yes. Those questions I always start to second guess myself. You kind of you select your answer, you're like, oh, hang on a minute, and then you're like overanalyzing it. So, we've kind of gone through all of these things, and we're right at the top of the hour. And hopefully it's given you a really good summary. And thanks, Daniel, for keeping me,
company,
straight and narrow, and pointing out where I make silly mistakes.
Well, thanks everybody for watching, and we hope you learned a lot from it, and have a great Ignite.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a whole load of information here which you can use if you go to aka.ms/learn live. You can see lots and lots of resources there. So been fantastic having you here, and thanks ever so much for participating in the chat as well. If you've got any other questions, feel free to reach out to Daniel or I, and we will do our best to answer them. So thanks ever so much for coming.